Donald Trump has decided to defend women and protect their safe spaces from an increasingly belligerent trans lobby. This video goes through all of the things that he's put in his new executive order and why we in the United Kingdom really need to adopt something similar. This video is not about attacking anybody. You want to run around in a frock? You do that. Julius Caesar certainly did, and everybody had a lot of respect for him. But this is about how we protect women from what is a significant threat to their freedom. Hello everyone, this is Andre Walker. Thanks so much for watching this video. Please do subscribe, but more importantly, hit the bell notification icon. It's the best way to absolutely guarantee you get all my videos as soon as they are released. I've got to be totally honest with you. I think I'm the same as quite a lot of people watching this. I'd never really considered myself a feminist, and certainly I include women who watch this as well, who sort of thought, oh, you know, that Burn the Bra Brigade was a bit ridiculous. They much more look at the suffragettes who wanted women to vote, and indeed those women who worked in factories during the Second World War. A lot of viewers, that will be their mothers and aunts, and those people have a great deal of respect for them. But they didn't really think of them in terms of the Women's Liber Brigade, and kind of were a bit rude to them, you know, the short haircuts and looking like 14-year-old boys and all that sort of thing. But actually, I think it's important for any conservative, for any right-winger, to be a feminist now, simply because I look at the rights that my mother enjoyed, and my mother still grew up in a period where she got half the wages my dad did. Well, actually, that's not true, and he'll admit this if he was here now. She earned more than he did, but still she got 50% of what she would have earned had she been a man. But anyway, I jest slightly. The reality is women had rights for about 5 minutes and then those rights disappeared. Let me tell you, sorry, not let me tell you, let me give you the example, because it really is important, of that woman in the Olympics who went out boxing. Boxing's not my cup of tea, though, believe it or not, my uncle was the Lonsdale belt holder of the junior welterweight division in '68, I think it was. So he was a British national champion. But boxing's not really my thing. I watch it every now and again. But I will tell you one thing I do know about boxing. You know, when that bloke came out and fought the woman, every single boxing federation in the world who have never agreed on anything at all agreed that men in women's boxing is a disaster. The IOC were the only people who allowed it to go ahead. That girl melted onto her knees. And I will tell you, it does happen. It can happen. Thank God it doesn't happen very often. But in boxing, there can be a one-punch kill. And if we allow men into boxing, that's certainly going to happen. But we've seen other examples. I mean, what about that sad situation at Pennsylvania where, you know, they now have a secret medal holding for the girls who come 4th, 5th and 6th, because they know 1st, 2nd and 3rd isn't a thing. And Leah Thomas with her getting into women's changing rooms. Now, I mean, look, I've never been to women's changing rooms, and rightly so, but obviously with the swimming costumes being quite tight, the girls have to shimmy into them. And as you can imagine, nothing wrong with that if it's a bunch of women. But Leah Thomas, we dispute whether Leah Thomas is a man or a woman, but I think we also need to question whether he's trans. And I'll tell you the reason, because all he's done is grown his hair and called himself Leah. I didn't realise he doesn't even shave his chest. I mean, it's just absolutely and completely ludicrous. But this video is about, and I'll get the name correct, defending women from gender ideology, extremism, and restoring biological truth to the federal government. What it does is this: it recognises only two sexes. Now, look, I'm going to say this to you. Fashions change over the years, don't they? So let me give you this as an example. In the Georgian period, it was men that wore makeup and women tended not to. I'll tell you the reason. Because basically, men had to go to court all the time, and basically they'd go, oh, look at that craggy-faced old git. He looks absolutely dreadful. Whereas women were expected to be quite good-looking anyway. And so it's basically the blokes who were kind of the dandies of this world. Similarly, things like a sari today is much more similar to a toga that was worn in Roman times. And so for me, wear whatever you want. I'm actually pretty sceptical about the banning of the burqa, not because I like people wearing it, but at the same time, I just instinctively don't like the idea of what you were being defined by the government. But that's not the issue. It's a couple of issues. Issue number one is about prisons. Issue number two for me is about sports. Well, let's actually group those together. Access to women's stuff. And I think also it's about the way that suddenly being a woman makes you the enemy. You know, we're no longer talking about gay people or lesbians. We're now talking about everyone's a woman now. Now, as I once said to Julia Hartley-Brill, everyone should be a woman, but there should be two types. The fat, hairy ones like me and the fragrant, attractive ones with big boobs. There should be two different types. The reality is, if you look at prisons, women in prison are often victims of abuse. Now, look, probably men are as well, but they are people who are uniquely susceptible to SA. And I think when you see somebody like Ian Huntley wanting to go to a women's prison, you have to worry. Also, I've seen videos of women, you know, people in dresses going into women's toilets, and you can see they're excited because the dress doesn't hold it back if anything like that happens. Unacceptable. Really, totally unacceptable. Now, I'm not saying that every trans person is a artist. I'm not saying every trans person is a criminal. Many of them pay their taxes and do whatever they want to do. But you've got to accept that when we come to this self-definition thing, if you declare yourself a woman and you get into a women's prison, who are going to be the most likely people to declare themselves women? It's not genuine trans people or people who genuinely feel trans. It's going to be the artists, the SA brigade who attempt to do it. That is the significant risk. But anyway, let's go on to what Donald Trump has said. The federal government recognises only two genders, man and woman. And that is decided by your biological sex at birth. Forget all the rest of it. He requires that federal agencies use the word sex instead of gender in all policies and documents. He reverses policies allowing transgender individuals to change gender markers on passports. So you can't just simply phone up the government now and say, I'm a woman, my name's Keith, and then suddenly you become a woman on your passport. Ending federal anti-discrimination protections for transgender people. Now that sounds really, really bad, doesn't it? Because often this sounds like we're just trying to be nice to people. But actually, the discriminations we're talking about is refusing to allow women into women-only safe spaces. So think about that transaction. You are able to define yourself as a woman by federal law and then sue the women that try and stop you joining the women's football team. Absolutely crazy. Mandates housing transgender inmates in prison based on their sex assigned at birth. Now, I personally don't agree with that. I will say if you've had the chop, I think you should go to a women's prison. But if you've not had the chop, then you shouldn't. Some of you will agree, some of you will disagree. But personally, I think when it comes to the risk of SA, it's what genitals you have that actually matter. But okay, in terms of the more general point, look, one of the things about political correctness, one of the things about transgenderism, one of the things about any sort of rights agenda, you know what? We don't want to be rude to people. When I see somebody walking down the street in a frock with an Adam's apple, good on them. Enjoy yourself. Have what you want and do what you want to do with your life. It's not for me to define that. But when you talk about the rights of the majority being oppressed by the rights of the minority, then it becomes a problem. Our prisons, and I know this sounds awful, need to be as safe as they can be. You can't have a free-for-all like they have in the United States, sorry, in South America, much as Fraxel Rudy Cabana, I'd make an exception. We can't allow that. Similarly, you know, for me, the idea that women in women's sports get so heavily discriminated against, you know, I do have respect for that female boxer who went up against that bloke. But honestly, it can't be allowed to happen. And that Caster Semenya, let me tell you about this. I think there is a case in Caster Semenya's case because, as you know, it was later discovered that she had internal testicles. So she is somebody who's suffering from a disability. I can understand, given that she was born with a vagina, I can understand why she is extremely upset about people saying she's a man. The reality is there are a small number of people who are neither men nor women because of some sort of deformity or abnormality. I do have time for that. And Caster Semenya, I can understand why she has been an advocate for being recognised as a woman. However, that is not the majority of cases. And I think we need to delineate supporting those people who are in a position of having a disability or an abnormality. And in the case of Caster Semenya, medical science is not sure what we should describe her as, but I can understand why she's upset. But that is very different to somebody who is a man wearing women's swimming costumes and winning every single competition. And whether they do it out of malice or whether they do it because they're genuine believers actually doesn't matter, because there can be no greater frustration. When I was at university, and I know this video is going on a while, but when I was at university, I participated in university debating. Now, I went to Royal Holloway College in the University of London. It didn't have the big debating union that Oxford and Cambridge did, but I built myself up. We didn't have any coaches, so we taught ourselves to be coaches, and I got to the grand final of the European Debating Championships and was rated overall 4th in Europe. Pretty big achievement. I often think I'd have done better if I'd have gone to Oxford, but then again, I wasn't willing to put in the work at school. But can you imagine when I was losing competitions and trying to teach myself, being like one of those female swimmers at Pennsylvania, where they know that no matter how hard they work, they can never, ever, ever physically beat Leah Thomas? What does that say to women's rights? And as I said at the beginning of this video, it's not about being nasty to anyone. It's about feminism. And I think we all have to be feminists now. I think that it's time for the British government to follow what Donald Trump has done. Those simple messages that I lay out in this video are obvious and, to me, unassailably truths. Until next time, goodbye.